Welcome to Spurbs Herbs, episode 110. I can't believe we broke the 100 mark, but we're sailing right past that. Today we're going to be doing a Chinese herbal formula, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. So welcome. Let's get into it. Today we will explore another Chinese herbal formula, Jia Wei Xiang Su Zan, or Augmented Cyperus and Perilla leaf powder. This formula is in the subcategory of formulas that release exterior when cold and is especially good at treating colds with interior qi depression. We're going to do our usual deep dive into this formula and find out if there's any evidence or concerns about it. And as usual, we'll be adding something a little different. We are going to continue our discussion of pharmacognosy. We haven't done this for a while now, but we're going to talk about pharmacognosy and discuss terpenoids, which are, as we're going to find out, very important constituents. It's going to be another incandescent discussion of herbs, so please join us. Before we get going, I wanted to let you know we are continuing an amazing special for our courses. If you use them for continuing education, professional development, or just for your own edification, we are offering 50 hours of courses for an unbelievable price. Normally, this would cost $750. However, with the special code 50CEUS, that's 50 CEUs, this is going to be only $325. That's less than half off of our normal price. Plus, on top of that, you can get a free signed copy of one of my books, just pay for shipping and handling. This is a free copy of Integrative Pharmacology, combining modern pharmacology with integrative medicine, or Playing the Game, a step-by-step approach to accepting insurance as an acupuncturist. Either one of those, you can get one of those for free. Just go to the webpage, www.integrativemedicinecouncil.org. That's Integrative Medicine Council, COUNCIL.org/CEUS1. That's /CEUS1, CEUS1, the number one, to get this amazing deal. Okay. So it has been a little while since we discussed pharmacognosy. We did it, we're going to see, back in the 80s episodes. So it's been a lot of episodes since then, probably over a year. So we're going to touch on what pharmacognosy is again, and then we're going to talk about what a specific type of molecule is. So let's talk about what pharmacognosy is. The American Society of Pharmacognosy describe what pharmacognosy is and its areas of study, and quote, "Pharmacognosy is the study of natural product molecules, typically secondary metabolites, that are useful for their medicinal, ecological, gustatory, meaning food, or other functional properties." That's the quote. We've discussed a few of the classes of these molecules in previous episodes, including episodes 82 and 83. And we have, in several of our Spurbs Herbs episodes, we have covered different types of these molecules. We've covered, these molecules are almost always included when we talk about the contents of herbs. So we don't really talk about it with these our formula Spurbs Herbs, but we do talk about it when we talk about individual herbs quite frequently. Sometimes we expand on them, sometimes we don't. In this episode, we're going to talk about another class of molecules, terpenoids. As before, this comes from my series of integrative nutrition courses, where I have a whole course on pharmacognosy, and we get into all of this in great depth. So that's my integrative nutrition courses, which are just starting to trickle out now. So if you didn't see them live, you haven't been able to see them since, but I'm getting them posted. I've gotten the first one or two up at this point. So let's talk about terpenoids, also known as isoprenoids or isoprenoids. Terpenoids are the most abundant and structurally diverse family of natural products. Almost everything we talk about mentions some sort of terpenoid. With over 80,000 known representatives, terpenoids have a variety of commercial applications in the pharmaceutical, food, cosmetic, and chemical industries, according to Vidal, Macreath, and Clement. Drugs that fall into this category include paclitaxel and artemisinin, and popular supplements include lycopene, astaxanthin, and beta-carotene. So if you're not familiar with paclitaxel, that's an anti-cancer drug. Artemisinin is an amazing drug, and it actually comes from a Chinese herb, Artemisia herba, a relatively popular Chinese herb, and it is really useful as an anti-malarial. In fact, the gentleman who discovered this won a Nobel Prize for this discovery. So that's a huge thing. And of course, lycopene comes from tomatoes. We know that. Astaxanthin is sort of a newer supplement that's out there. And of course, beta-carotene we know very well from carrots, and it's supposed to be very good for the eyes. So you see these are all terpenoids that we're talking about here. And terpenoids are made up of isoprene units, and they form the basic unit to construct terpenoids. So this isoprene is 5 carbons and 8 hydrogens. I have a picture of it here for those of you who can see the visual, but basically it involves a double bond between 2 carbons, and in that second carbon there's another methanol group coming up, another carbon group coming off of that, and then another one. So there's 2 carbon groups coming off of that one, and the one of those is free hanging, and the other one is double bonded to another carbon group. So there's 2 double bonds in these isoprene units. So C5H8, 5 carbons, 8 hydrogens. The naming of terpenoids is based on how many isoprene units make them up. So those isoprene units that we just talked about, they can polymerize, is what we call it. They can come together, and they can make other molecules. So if one isoprene is used, it's called a hemiterpenoid, and if 2 isoprenes are used, it's called a monoterpenoid. So it actually takes 2 isoprenes to become a monoterpenoid. That's important. Monoterpenoids can be acyclic, in other words, not circular. Monocyclic, in other words, there's 1 circle in them, they're connected to each other, or actually bicyclic, there can be 2 circles that are in there. So that's when the circle that I'm talking about here is when a carbon binds with another carbon in the molecule, so that it creates a circle. So it's 2 isoprenes are a monoterpenoid. 3 isoprenes are called a sesquiterpenoid, and these come up very commonly when we're talking about our herbal constituents. These are the most diverse category and can be linear, in other words, just a line, mono, bi, or tricyclic, so they can have 1, 2, or 3 circles in it. And like I said, these are quite a big deal. Now, we're starting to get a little bit of a rhythm with this. So 1 isoprene is a hemiterpenoid or half terpenoid. 2 isoprenes is a monoterpenoid or 1 terpenoid. And 3 is a sesquiterpenoid, which I'm assuming means 1 1/2. So sesqui is not one of those prefixes that I'm super familiar with, but I'm assuming that's 1 1/2. So what does that mean if we have 4 isoprenes? That means it's called a diterpenoid, or 2, di meaning 2, so 2 terpenoids, so diterpenoid, and these can be acyclic, mono, bi, tri, tetra, so 4, so it can be 1, 2, 3, or 4, or even more. We call that macrocyclic. Actually, macrocyclic is probably when the whole thing is a big circle. So very diverse. So that's diterpenoids. If we have 5 isoprenes, this is called a sesterpenoid, and so that's basically a 2 1/2 terpenoid. And then if we have 6 isoprenes, if we have mono and di, what do you think 6 isoprenes are going to be called? A triterpenoid. And sterols, which are incredibly common, and when made by plants, phytosterols are triterpenoids, very bioactive, and include sitosterol, campesterol, and stigmasterol. Now, if you've been listening to our Herbs podcasts, you will recognize those terms. They're very common constituents of herbs. I can't tell you how many times I've said this has beta cytosterol in it, and that's what we're talking about here is these triterpenoids with 6 isoprenes. If we continue this, we skip over 7. There aren't, I don't know if there aren't any, but they don't seem to be particularly useful. And we go straight to 8 isoprenes. And of course, we have mono, di, tri. 8 isoprenes are going to be called tetraterpenoid or 4 terpenoids. The most common form of tetraterpenoids are carotenoids, which include lycopene, lutein, zeaxanthine, and beta-carotene. So those are the ones that were quite common, that we're quite familiar with. And there can be over 8 isoprenes in these terpenoids, and they're called a polyterpenoid, just meaning many. And these include rubber molecules. So all our natural rubbers are actually going to be polyterpenoids, having greater than 8 isoprenes. There are also 3 types of irregular terpenoids, and those come down. These are called tropones in compounds of head to middle condensation of isoprene units. Okay, wait a second. Let me break that. Tropones and compounds of head to middle condensation of isoprene units. Usually, when we put these isoprenes together, they're kind of head to tail, head to tail. This is saying head to middle condensation. So in other words, they're coming together in the middle. So one, instead of going from one head into one attaching to the tail of one, the head attaching to a tail, the head attaches to the middle. And both of these, the tropones and those head to middle condensation of isoprene units, are considered monoterpenoids. So remember, there's going to be 2 isoprene units. And then we have the 13 carbon ionones and damascones. Remember, if we're doing this, there's 5 carbons in each of these. So 13 is an odd number, but apparently they have isoprenes in that. So they call them sort of the irregular terpenoids. And so 13 carbon ionones and damascones. And I got to be honest with you, I don't think I've seen these. They probably have popped up, but I don't think I've seen these often in the herbs that we're talking about. They're not hitting any, oh yeah, I remember those sort of notes. And here's the other thing that's really important for us too, is terpenoids are major components of essential oils, also known as volatiles. So those smells that we get are going to be based often, our major components are going to be terpenoids. So these terpenoids have aromas to them, potentially. Some hemiterpenoids, remember that's 1 isoprene unit, have been shown to have antiplatelet aggregation and immunosuppressive effects. In other words, they suppress the immune system when it's overacting, and may come from the Chinese herbs Qianpi, which is a very common herb, Qingpi, which is a pretty common herb, Bingpian, another fairly common herb, and Zhishi. All of these are relatively common herbs in Chinese. Qianpi is super common. The rest are pretty darn common. Another subcategory of monoterpenoids are called iridoids and are bicyclic, so they have 2 circles in them. These can be non-glycosidic or simple iridoids. So non-glycosidic means there's no sugar attached to it, and those are called simple iridoids. They can be iridoid glycosides, which means there is a sugar attached to the iridoid. They could also be seco-iridoid glycosides, or bis-iridoid, which is a dimerization of iridoids and seco-iridoids. So seco-iridoids, I'm not sure exactly what that refers to here. I don't know if we have it. No, we don't. A bis-iridoid would mean a double iridoid. So dimerization means a repeat of iridoids and seco-iridoids. Iridoids have been shown to have anti-inflammatory, anti-tumor, so they help cancers. Hepatoprotective, they protect the liver. Neuroprotective, protect the nerves. Hypoglycemic, they lower blood sugar levels. And hypolipidemic activity. So hypolipidemic means it reduces fat and cholesterol in the blood. Chinese herbs that contain iridoids include Changye Qian, which is not a very commonly used herb. Sesquiterpenoids can be found in Qinghao, that is that Artemisia we were talking about earlier, Guanghuo Xiang, and Zongshuang Xiang Tumu, which is not a common Chinese herb. The other 2 are. relatively common. Diterpenoids, the 4 isoprenes, may have antifungal, antimalarial, and anti-cancer properties, and may be found in danshen, a relatively quite common Chinese herb, and baiguo, which is ginkgo. Some of you may be familiar with ginkgo. In general, terpenoids have shown antimicrobial, anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory, and relaxant effects in vitro, which means in glass, and not necessarily in live models. And they can be anti-cancer, anti-nociceptive, which means pain, anti-pain, hepatoprotective, helping the liver, and anti-inflammatory effects in vivo, which means in life. Now, usually when we use the term in vivo, we generally talk about in animals. When we talk about it in humans, we say clinically. So that's the other thing. So there are lots of clinical trials on many individual terpenoids, way more for us to get into here. Ralph is asking, terpenoids, aren't they always with strong colors? And how is their connection with polyphenols? So polyphenols are different. A phenol is very different than an isoprene unit. So there's no connection with polyphenols other than they're both very much constituents of herbs. Polyphenols are very common constituents of herbs as well. And I can't say if they're with strong colors or not. I would tend to think no, not necessarily. Some might be, but I don't think in general. But honestly, nothing in the when I was researching this in the chemistry mentioned anything about the visuals on these. So I don't know, but I would say probably not strong colors, but just from what I know about organic chemistry. So and that's our introduction. Thank you for that, Ralph, for asking. And with this introduction to terpenoids, let's get into today's formula. So today we're going to be talking about Jiawei Xiang San, or Augmented Cyperus and Perilla leaf powder. Let's start off the discussion of this formula by acknowledging something of an anomaly here. I use 2 main texts when looking at herbal formulas. I've done it since the very beginning of doing Sperm's herbs. One says this is a mainline formula. In other words, in the list of formulas, this is on that list of formulas. And another one, the other one says it is a modification of a mainline formula. They're both probably true. This is absolutely a modification of another formula, that other formula being Xiang San. So whenever you see Jiawei, we are interpreting that, we're translating that here as augmented, but Jiawei actually means additions and subtractions, add and subtract. So in other words, we take a formula, Xiang San, and we Jiawei it, means we're changing it, we're adding and subtracting from that formula. So as soon as you do that, that's a modification of the main formula. So this is a modification of a formula. But what's interesting is one book says the original formula, Xiang San, not as commonly used as Jiawei Xiang San, which is a much more commonly used and popular formula than the Xiang San. The other one says, well, that may be the case, but it's still a modification of Xiang San. So Xiang San is going to be our main formula, and Jiawei Xiang San is going to be a modification of that mainline formula. I think they both have absolutely legitimate reasons for making the judgment calls they have. Jiawei Xiang San, as far as I know, is a far more commonly used formula than Xiang San, but Jiawei Xiang San is absolutely a modification of Xiang San. So depending on what you emphasize, you can go either way. It's a mainline formula or it's a modified formula. I usually, unless they are very important, do not discuss modified formulas except in the context of its parent formula. So it's I'm kind of in a sticky place here, which is great. I love being in a sticky place. This means we're going to suss out some stuff as we already have. So the term Jiawei or augmented means this is a modification of another formula. In Chinese Herbal Medicine Formulas and Strategies by Scheid and his team acknowledges this, but says this modification is the mainline formula in Xiang, as I just said, Xiang San, Augmented Cyperus and Perilla leaf powder. That's not augmented, sorry, that is just Cyperus and Perilla leaf powder is listed as an associated formula under Jiawei Xiang San. Our other text, Chinese Medical Herbal Formulas and Applications, Pharmacological Effects in Clinical Research by Chen and Chen. So it's usually, I refer to them, Shai et al. And Shai and his team and Chen Chen. Does the opposite, saying Xiang Susan is the mainline formula and Zhao Wei Xiang Susan is the related formula. They call it related rather than associated, but they're similar things. As we discuss the formula, we will by necessity discuss both formulas. It's kind of hard to talk about one without talking about the other. So from Chen Chen, other names of the original formula include Xiang Susan. So instead of Xiang, it's Hsiang. This is kind of the difference between Pinyin and Wade Giles, which are just ways of what we could say romanticizing the Chinese characters and pronunciations. And by romanticizing, we mean putting it into Latin characters. So it's the same exact pronunciation, but with an HS rather than X. They also call it Cyperus and Perilla powder. So basically off the leaf, and then also Cyperus and Perilla formula. This formula is in a subcategory of formulas that release exterior when cold under the category of formulas that release the exterior. So that's from Shai and his team. And Chen Chen basically say the same thing, but a slightly different way. Say it is in the acrid and warm exterior releasing formulas subcategory under the exterior releasing formulas category. So one says the actions of this is to release exterior when cold. The other one says basically because it treats exterior when cold, but it's actually acrid and warm, and so it actually is. But that's the same thing. So when we say acrid, that means release the exterior. Basically, spicy releases this exterior, acrid releases the exterior. So they're saying the same thing, but one is from what the herbs are doing, and the other one is from what it's treating. So, but they're saying the same thing. So we're going to go over this category. As we've discussed in previous episodes, Shai et al. Describes the overall category in detail, formulas that release the exterior. And we've looked at what Chen Chen says about this category and subcategory once, and we will repeat that here again. So we get kind of both perspectives from the books. And here's what Chen Chen say. Exterior releasing formulas induce perspiration, release exterior factors from the skin and muscles, and or promote the eruption of measles. This method of treatment is known as Han Fa, or sweating, one of the Ba Fa, or 8 treatment methods, described in the Wangdi Neijing Yellow Emperor's Inner Classic, written in the 1st or 2nd century AD. I've always heard 1st or 2nd century BCE, so there's some discrepancy there, but it is the oldest existing book on Chinese medicine. I don't want to say it's the oldest book ever. It's the oldest one that we have. The term exterior syndrome refers to the invasion of superficial parts of the body by one or more of the Liao Yin, or 6 exogenous factors. Sometimes that's pronounced the 6 pad. That's just translated as 6 pathogens, namely wind, cold, summer heat, dampness, dryness, and fire. These 6 exogenous factors attack superficial areas of the body through the skin, mouth, or nose. This causes a number of exterior signs and symptoms, such as aversion to cold, fever, headache, muscle aches, a thin white or yellow tongue coating, and a superficial pulse. While most exterior releasing formulas are indicated for either wind cold or wind heat syndromes, they also treat other disorders such as abscesses and sores, edema, dysentery or malaria, measles, and the early stages of Wenbing or warm disease. That's a whole category of Chinese disease. At this early stage of illness, which the disease factor is located at the exterior, the treatment plan should focus on expelling the disease factor from the skin and muscle levels. The exterior releasing method is the most appropriate method for achieving this goal. If the Liao Yin, or 6 exogenous factors, are not released from the exterior, they may proceed inward to attack the Zang, solid, and Fu, hollow organs, which leads to more serious illness. Thus, treat exterior conditions immediately with exterior releasing formulas to prevent complications and deterioration. Xiang continue with cautions and contraindications for this category. Exterior releasing formulas are generally taken as warm decoctions to induce perspiration. Mild perspiration over the whole body is ideal. The body may be covered with a blanket to ensure and facilitate perspiration. However, profuse sweating should be avoided, since it may deplete qi and yin, and in severe cases cause qi or yang collapse. After taking the decoction, avoid exposure to wind to prevent recurrent attacks. Avoid foods that are raw, cold, oily, or greasy, as they may decrease absorption and compromise the therapeutic effects of these formulas. If interior symptoms are observed along with exterior symptoms, the normal treatment plan is to treat the exterior first, then the interior condition second, or treat both interior and exterior conditions at the same time. Exterior releasing formulas are contraindicated if the disease factor has fully progressed into the interior. These formulas are also contraindicated in the presence of ulcerated sores, erupted measles, deficiency type edema, and dehydration from vomiting or diarrhea. Next, Chen discussed the subcategory of acrid and warm releasing formulas. These formulas treat exterior wind-cold syndromes. Common symptoms when wind and cold invade include aversion to cold, fever, headache, neck and or shoulder stiffness, soreness and pain of the muscles and extremities, the absence of thirst, no perspiration, or fever and aversion to cold that persist after perspiration, a thin white tongue coating, and a superficial tight or superficial moderate pulse. So what are the Chinese medical actions of this formula? Scheid and his team say this formula promotes sweating and releases the exterior. So pretty straightforward with the medical actions. Chen basically says the same thing, but in slightly different ways. It says it releases the exterior, which is what Scheid et al. Says, and induces diaphoresis, which means induces sweating. Diaphoresis is sweating. So instead of saying promotes sweating, it says induces diaphoresis. So they're basically saying the exact same thing. So what are the Chinese medical indications for these formulas? Scheid and his team say this formula can be used for the common cold year-round, headache and stiffness of the neck, nasal obstruction or runny nose, aches and pains in the body or extremities, fever with chills or aversion to wind but without sweating, a thin white tongue coating, and a floating pulse. This is wind cold in the exterior, where the battle between the pathogenic and the normal qi produces relatively mild symptoms. This may be because the pathogen itself is not strong and has only penetrated relatively superficially, or because the person's constitution is not strong enough to engage in such a battle. The formula is therefore particularly suitable for patients with a weak constitution, children, and the elderly. Chen say clinical manifestations include headache, neck stiffness, stuffy or runny nose, body aches, fever, aversion to cold, aversion to wind, absence of perspiration, a thin white tongue coating, and a superficial pulse. Clinically, this formula can treat the common cold in all seasons in the elderly and children or in individuals with weakened immunity. The cold in this case is not very severe, and strong exterior-releasing herbs such as ma huang or herba ephedra and guizhi, Ramula cinnamomi, that's cinnamon twig, are not appropriate. So what's the history of this formula? Both Scheid and his team and Chen both agree the source for this formula is Yi Shui Xin Wu, written in 1732 by Cheng Guo Peng. So that's a relatively recent book. Scheid et al. Translates this title as Awakening of the Mind in Medical Studies, while Chen translate it as Medical Revelations. So interesting difference in translation of the same book, Yi Shui Xin Wu. What are its ingredients? This formula is a variation of Cyperus and Perilla leaf powder, as we've discussed, Xiang Su San. Its strategy is to disperse wind cold from the exterior while simultaneously facilitating the proper movement of qi in the interior. Resolving the exterior allows the qi in the interior to flow more freely. Opening qi constraint in the interior facilitates its movement to the surface, where it helps disperse pathogenic influences. Our first herb that we're going to talk about is Perilla folium, or Zitsuye. We need 4.5 grams for this formula, and it's warm. It's from the warm, acrid herbs that release the exterior category of herbs. Its traditional functions include induces sweating and releases the exterior, disseminates and facilitates the lung qi, calms wheezing and stops coughing, promotes urination and reduces edema, warms and disperses cold pathogens. The chief ingredients in this formula are the warm, acrid, and light herbs Perilla folium, Zitsuye, and Schizonipida herba, Jingje, which we're not going to talk about for a few ingredients yet, which facilitate the movement of qi in the exterior, open up the skin and interstices, and dispel when cold. And these are relatively, as warm, acrid herbs, these are, especially Zitsuye, are mild in that function. They're not as strong as Ma Huang or Guizhi, as we mentioned earlier. Second herb we're going to talk about is Cyperus rhizoma, or Xiang. We need 3.6 grams, and this is actually in the category of herbs that regulate the qi. So regulate means to move the qi. And its traditional functions are spreads and regulates liver qi, and regulates menstruation and alleviates pain. So that is Xiang. And in this formula, 3 assistants regulate the qi and blood in the interior, promoting the qi dynamic to enable the normal qi to ascend and spread throughout the exterior. Cyperus rhizoma Xiang releases constraint and disperses stagnation from all 12 channels. Our next herb is another one of these qi-moving herbs, Citri reticulate pericarpium, or Chen-pi. We just mentioned Chen-pi earlier when we were talking about terpenoids. This is a very common herb. It's actually tangerine peel, so we all have access to this. It's 3.6 grams is what we need for this formula, and it does come from the herbs that regulate the qi. Its normal traditional functions are regulates the qi, adjusts the middle and relieves the diaphragm, dries dampness and transforms phlegm, and helps prevent stagnation. It's another of the 3 assistants that we just mentioned. Citri reticulate pericarpium Chen-pi regulates the qi, directs downward, and dries dampness in the case in this formula. Chen say about the original formula, that's the Xiang. They say Chen-pi pericarpium Citri reticulae helps Xiang rhizoma Cyperus regulate the qi flow and harmonize the middle jiao, or middle burner, which we've talked about the burners before. The middle burner is really focused on digestion, so it harmonizes the digestion. Our next herb is Glycericerae radix preparata, or Zhigan Sao. This is honey fried licorice, probably the most common herb used in formulas. And we're using 2.1 grams here, and this comes from the herbs that tonify the qi. And traditionally, this herb is prepared with honey, which significantly increases its ability to tonify the middle, augment the heart and spleen qi, and harmonize the properties of other herbs. This is why it's such a popular addition to formulas, is because it harmonizes the properties of other herbs. And in this formula, the envoy, Glycericerae radix preparata, Zhigan Sao, harmonizes the actions of the other herbs, strengthens the stomach, and prevents the qi regulating herbs from depleting the qi. If you overregulate qi, you kind of disperse the qi. So this is protecting against that. And here we go finally to the other chief ingredients, Schizonipida herba Jingje. We're going to be using 3 grams here, and it is also in the warm acrid herbs that release the exterior, which is interesting. You know, so far we've talked about a lot of different categories of herbs, and only 2 are actually in the category so far that we're looking for. This is the whole reason we want this formula, is warm acrid herbs that release the exterior. Traditionally, Jingje releases the exterior and assists the yang, warms and unblocks the channels and collaterals, warms the yang and transforms the thin mucus, assists the heart yang and unblocks the yang qi of the chest, warms the channels, vessels, and collaterals, and warms the middle and directs turbid yin downward. So Zisuye, Folium, Perilla, and Jingje, Herba schizenepida, serve as the chief herbs to release the exterior and induce mild diaphoresis or sweating. Their potency is only moderate, however, so they do not carry the risk of damaging qi and body fluids, so much safer sort of herbs. Our next herb is Cyperus radix, Fang Feng, and we need 3 grams of this, and this is also in our category of warm acrid herbs that release the exterior. Traditionally, it expels wind dampness, alleviates pain, and stops spasms. The deputies are 3 herbs that focus on releasing pathogens from the muscles, channels, and collaterals. Cyperus radix, Fang Feng, and Gentiana macrocephala radix, Qin Jiao, dispel wind cold and alleviate pain in this formula. That's their goal, their job in this formula. Our next herb is that Qin Jiao, the Gentiana macrocephala radix, Qin Jiao. We need 3 grams of that, and this is not in herbs that release the exterior, but herbs that dispel wind dampness. It's a very commonly used herb for pain. So it dispels wind dampness and soothes the sinews and collaterals, clears heat from deficiency, resolves dampness and reduces jaundice, and moistens the intestines and unblocks the bowels. So those are the traditional uses of it. And as we already mentioned, it's used with that Cyperus radix, Fang Feng to dispel wind cold and alleviate pain. Our next herb is Viticus fructus or manjingza, which clears and benefits the head and eyes, relieves pain by draining dampness and expelling wind, and it is one of those 3 deputies. Viticus fructus manjingza is particularly indicated for headaches. So this is useful for headaches, which often accompany colds. We have a few more herbs. Our next one is Xiāng rhizoma, which is in Chinese Xiāng. We need 1.5 grams, which is a very small dose of this particular herb. So it's helping is basically, and it's an herb that it's in the herbs that regulate the blood category. So we're just kind of protecting the blood with this herb. So it invigorates the blood, promotes the movement of qi, expels wind, and alleviates pain. It is an assistant. So assistants, Cyperus rhizoma Xiang Fu, together with Xiāng rhizoma Xiāng, an essential herb in the treatment of headaches, and focuses particularly on the liver, which governs ascension and dispersal. If qi and blood can move unobstructed as in the interior, external pathogens are more easily dispersed from the exterior. So that's the function of this herb. Finally, our last herb is Zingiberus rhizoma Shenjiang. Excuse me, it should be Shenjiang. I have written Ganjiang. I'll have to make a change of that, which is fresh ginger. And this is from the warm acrid herbs that release the exterior. It releases the exterior and disperses cold, warms the middle burner and alleviates vomiting, warms the lungs and stops cough, and resolves toxicity. So Shenjiang is another assistant, Citru reticulated pericarpium champi, together with the acrid and dispersing Zingiberus rhizoma recens Shenjiang. It focuses on the lungs, facilitating its control of the pores and interstices. All right, preparation. Shahid and his team discussed preparation of Jiaowei Xiang Su San, and says it's a decoction. The source text advises that the decoction should be taken warm and that its consistency should be thin, resembling sweat. That's an interesting picture of a decoction. This implies that the herb should not be cooked very long. Chen says the source text instructs to coarsely grind the ingredients and prepare as a decoction. Take the warm, strained decoction and cover the body with blankets to promote mild sweating. Commentary. Shahid et al., as usual, have an excellent commentary on this formula. The composition of this formula reflects widespread concerns among physicians and patients in late imperial China regarding the potential side effects associated with improper use of strong diaphoretic formulas like ephedra decoction Mawang Tong or cinnamon twig decoction Guizhi Tong. These fears arose Against the background of cultural beliefs that attributed a weaker constitution to southern Chinese, due primarily to climatic factors. The cold climate in the north forced people to develop strong qi in the exterior in order to regulate the opening and closing of the pores and interstices. In the humid climate of the south, by contrast, the pores and interstices tended to be open, causing the qi in the exterior to become weak, while the qi dynamic itself was constrained by dampness. In the south, an aesthetic of prescribing developed that favored the use of mild and harmonizing herbs and formulas. The intention was to regulate the qi dynamic and rely on the body's own defenses rather than expel pathogens forcefully. Augmented Cyperus and Perilla leaf powder Jiawei Xiang Susan is a prime example of this style of medicine. Historical background. Another theory based on perceived climatic differences held that pathogenic qi in the north and south were substantially different. Rather than leading to proper cold damage disorders, the milder climate of the south was thought to cause more superficial invasions known as the common cold or gan mao. Wind rather than cold was presumed to be the main pathogen, with manifestations that were more varied and more difficult to affix to any specific one of the 6 warps. Getting into the word, we've talked about the 6 warps before. That's the translation. The term we often use are the 6. It's the 4 levels and the 6. Blanking on the term right off my back, but it's a common way we describe diseases in Chinese medicine. Wu Kun, a Ming Dynasty physician from Anhui, cogently summed up this line of thought. The pathogenic qi contracted by a person enters through the nose. It is really located in the upper portion of the body and not in any one of the 6 warps. Therefore, it causes headache. 6 channels is what we call it. 6 channel theory. Sorry, there we go. Therefore, it causes headache and fever and not much else. For this reason, it was necessary to find formulas that specifically treated this kind of common cold. Wu Kun suggested Cyperus and Perilla leaf powder of Xiang San, a formula used for when cold in the exterior, accompanied by qi stagnation in the interior. Cheng Guopeng, another physician from Anhui, who is more famous for systematizing treatment strategies into 8 methods or Ba Fa, followed Wu Kun's lead but developed a more specific alternative. In his own commentary to this formula, Cheng Guopeng states that the use of classical cold damage formulas not only readily leads to potentially dangerous side effects, but also that many physicians find it difficult to differentiate accurately between the various exterior patterns. He therefore offers one single formula to replace their usage. Its herbs are safe yet effective, and it also embodies superb methods of treatment from previous generations of physicians. Usage. To the foundation of Cyperus and Perilla powder, Xiang San, discussed below, Cheng Guopeng, we're not going to discuss it, but below in the book, Cheng Guopeng added a number of herbs aimed specifically at the dispersion of wind from the exterior and the head. This directs the forces of the qi dynamic toward this area, allowing it to dispel wind and relieve headaches without forcefully promoting sweating. The formula is thus ideally suited for the treatment of common colds in Western medical practice as well. It can be used as a standard formula for this purpose. Physicians, however, should follow Cheng's advice and make appropriate adjustments based on the local climate and culture, on individual constitution, and the precise location of the pathogen. His personal suggestions are listed under modifications below. Even though the formula achieves some of its power by opening the qi dynamic and thereby releasing the body's own potential for expelling pathogenic qi, its focus is nevertheless entirely on releasing the exterior. Thus, Cheng Guopeng himself advises against its use in patients who are constitutionally very deficient. To treat these patients, one should select from the formulas that tonify interior deficiency and release the exterior. In such cases, the pulse will be deficient in spite of very clear signs indicating external invasion. Let's talk about modifications. So Scheid et al. Discussed 14 modifications for this formula. Since there are so many, let's take a look at some of the more useful ones. We're not going to get into all 14 by nowhere near that. So for severe headaches, add 2.4 grams of no-top-tier-G rhizoma subradix or Xiāng and 2 stalks of Aliphistulosi bulbus or Sung Bai. That's white. That's scallion is what that is. So just add 2 stalks of scallion to this with the Xiāng. For spontaneous sweating and aversion to wind, add 3 grams each of Cinnamomum ramulus guizhir, that's cinnamon twig, and Paeonia radix alba by Xiao. Both of those are in guizhir tong, which is cinnamon twig decoction. Very interesting additions here. If these symptoms occur toward the end of spring or beginning of summer, one should be cautious about the simultaneous invasion of warm summer heat pathogens. It is not advisable to use Cinnamomum ramulus guizhir, which should be replaced by 4.5 grams of Tractylotus macrocephalae rhizoma or Baizhu, that is white Tractylotus. For greater yang channel pathology that has not been resolved but is accompanied by thirst and rough urination, indicating a bladder organ pattern, add 4.5 grams of Poria or Fuling and Akebia caulis or Mutong. For wheezing and coughing, add 4.5 grams each of Platycody radix Jiegong and Pusidani radix Qianhu and 7 pieces of 1 gram of Semen pruni Armanaceae Xingren, that is apricot seed. For constipation, add Rafani semen, Lyfudza, and Aurantii fructus Jerka. For recurrence of symptoms during menstruation, add Angelica sinensis radix or Dongui and Salvia militariserae radix Danshan. And Shen do not have any modifications because this is a related formula. They do not do modifications of related formulas. Comparisons. Scheid and his team compare this formula with one other formula, and that is Ten Divine or Miracle Decoction, Shi Shen Tong. Both formulas regulate the qi and release pathogens from the exterior. However, because Augmented Cyperus and Perilla leaf powder, Jiaowei Xiang Susan, does both of these things in a milder fashion, it is appropriate for less severe patterns. So there we go. So we're getting a really good picture of what this formula is useful for. Biomedical indications. Scheid and his team say, with the appropriate presentation, this formula may be used to treat biomedically defined disorders such as the common cold, influenza, upper respiratory tract infections, acute gastroenteritis, and globus pharyngeus, which is a feeling of something stuck in your throat. We often call that plumpit qi in Chinese medicine. Chen and Chen similarly say Xiang Susan can treat common cold, stomach influenza, acute gastroenteritis, chronic gastritis, and globus pharyngeus. They both agree on that. The science, a web search using both Google and Google Scholar yielded no modern research about this formula. Chen, because this is a related formula to Xiang Susan, also did not have any studies about this formula, though it did have 2 about Xiang Susan. None of them were strong enough for me to even mention here, honestly. So there's just a lot, we need a lot more science on this particular formula. Drug-herb interactions. A few herbs in this formula may present some risks for drug-herb interactions. Cytochrome P450 interactions, which is one of the risk factors we have for drug-herb interactions. We have 2 herbs that we're worried about. One is Glycerin radix or Gansao. That's the Zhigansao that we're using in this formula. May induce cytochrome P450, 2C19, and 3A4. We're particularly worried about 3A4. And Zingiberis rhizoma ganjian may inhibit 2C19. A case was reported of congestive heart failure and hypokalemia in a patient taking Gansao, furosemide, and digoxin. Furosemide is a loop diuretic. It's commonly called Lasix, and digoxin, which is a really heavy-duty drug. So, I personally wouldn't add herbs into a digoxin patient anyways. But some to be aware of here. The one thing I would say is that they took Gansao alone with these 2 drugs. The fact that it's in a formula kind of mitigates a lot of the negatives of Gansao. So So probably not as big of an issue, but still, Gonzal is always an issue when we're looking at heart conditions. Gonzal, talking about heart conditions, Gonzal may increase blood pressure and fluid retention when used with oral contraceptives, as shown in 2 case studies in an uncontrolled human study. An extract of ginger may speculatively enhance anticoagulation of warfarin and other anticoagulants. 10 grams of extract did affect platelet aggregation, while taking 4 grams daily for 3 months did not show significant anticoagulation activity. And of course, we're not using it anywhere near 10 grams, so I don't think we need to worry about that here in this formula. A large epidemiological study, N equals 1795, N meaning number of subjects, 1,795, so that's a pretty large study, showed increased adverse effects in patients taking Chaihu, Zhizhe, Wuweizi, Xu, Shengdiwan, Mutong, and Cheiqianzi. Actually, none of those are actually in this formula, so we're going to skip that. But I'm going to take that out. Okay, now, and that, we're starting to wrap up. Concerns about this formula, neither Scheid and his team nor Chen had any concerns listed about the use of this formula. And when I look at Chen, it was both this formula and the other formula, the main formula for them, the Xiang. This is probably due to its inherent gentle nature, so there aren't major concerns with this. So from a Chinese point of view, this is quite a safe formula. And that's where we're at. So that was today's formula, Jiawei Xiang or Augmented Cyperus and Perilla leaf powder. This is a useful formula for more mild colds and for children, the elderly, and those with weak constitutions. And I think it was actually the first formula we've discussed with no cautions or contraindications, meaning it's quite a safe formula. I got to say, going through all this together, I'm sitting here, I'm in San Diego, relatively mild weather. We don't have the humidity of Hawaii province, as we were talking about earlier. So actually, I think this is a really good formula for around this area. Not a formula that I use as frequently as other formulas, but I'm certainly going to consider it moving forward. This is a relatively mild formula for colds, and that could be very useful here in San Diego area. We started by discussing something a little different, by discussing terpenoids and their potential role as medicinal molecules. All in all, this was another incandescent discussion of Chinese formulae. In 2 weeks, we're going to be looking at another single Chinese herb, Chaihu bupluri-radix, or buplurum. This herb is in the Chinese medical subcategory of cool, acrid herbs that release the exterior under the category of release the exterior herbs. It is an incredibly important and commonly used Chinese herb that belies its category, as it is very useful for lots of conditions and not just for colds. And as always, we will look at something a little different. Please join us in 2 weeks as we explore one of our medicine's premier herbs. Definitely one of the top 10 herbs in Chinese medicine. I might put it in the top 5 herbs. It's a very commonly used herb. We're doing that in 2 weeks. I'd like to say thank you very much for listening. If you like this podcast, please do us a huge favor. Subscribe to our podcast in your favorite podcast app, or give us 5 stars. That would be, either of those would be great. And we thank you for even considering doing either of those. And don't forget our amazing continuing education deal. That's over half off, and get a free book at www.integrativemedicineCouncil.org/CEUS1. And you can always get in touch with me at Dr. Greg at spurbsherbs.com, or at our website, www.spurbsherbs.com. That's SPERBSHERBS.com. And as usual, we have a good bibliography. Thank you very much.